namely Tver, Staritsa, Torzhok, Rzhev, Vyshny Volochysk, Bezhetsk, and Kashin. Tver region is also hosting two national interregional tourist routes, the Tsar's Road and At the Command of the Soul, which lead to the source of the great Russian river, the Volga. Furthermore, one of the oldest officially established tourist routes in our country, the beloved Pushkin Ring of the Upper Volga, created in 1971, passes to the region. Tver Oblast has something for everyone. Nature lovers can enjoy the beauty of forests, rivers, and lakes. For example, the Lake Seliger, one of the largest lakes in the region, which is attracting tourists with picturesque landscapes. Here you can enjoy active outdoors, recreation, and try your hand at water sports. And the Volga River, which flows its first 685 kilometers through the Tver region, and the Mologa and Medveditsa rivers will leave no one unsatisfied. The region boasts large protected natural areas such as the Zavidovo National Park, and the MFA employees should know well that there are some lands managed by the Glava Perikei of the Russian MFA. And also we see here the Central Forest State Nature Biosphere Reserve, which makes the region particularly attractive to eco-tourists. In 2026, 3 cities of the Upper Volga region, Tver, Kalyazin, and Kashin, were included in the updated Golden Ring tourist route. The Tver region's cultural and historical heritage is striking in its diversity. You can see monasteries, churches, and estates dating back to various historical periods. For example, the Nilova Pustin monastery I visited myself a couple of years ago. It's a fantastic place, fantastic temple, church, and I was there in winter, but I wanted to return there in summer to see it not only covered by snow, but also in the summer period. And there is a very interesting museum there. And also I'd like to especially mention the Novotorsky Monastery. Who hasn't visited it yet should do so immediately. Also, a separate mention goes to the Starlink Holy Mission Monastery, which gave birth to the first Russian patriarch. And of course, you would be wise to visit the ancient town of Torzhok, which is surrounded by a cluster of estates designed by the talented Russian architect Nikolai Lvov, a follower of the great Italian Renaissance architect Andrea Palladio. Those estates represent the pinnacle of his work. Also of particular importance are the memorial museums dedicated to prominent figures such as Alexander Pushkin, Mikhail Kalinin, and Mikhail Saltykov-Shchedrin, and the hero of the Soviet Union, Lisa Chaikina. 2 cities in the Tver region, Rzhev and Tver itself, bear the honorary title of the Siltary of Military Glory. Since 2016, according to the executive order of the President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, there is an annual international military historical search exhibition, Rzhev Kalinin Front, going on there every year. Every year, approximately 500 enthusiasts from more than 50 Russian regions participate in this expedition, and they include the representatives of the All-Russian Public Movement for perpetuating the memory of those who died defending the fatherland, the aforementioned search movement of Russia, and other organizations are also involved in that search. In 2025, the Memory Watch near Rzhev reunited approximately 230 enthusiasts from 35 squads representing Belarus and various regions of Russia. Numerous festivals, concerts, exhibitions, and other types of events can be held in the Tver region. I will just name a few of them, and you will understand for yourself. It's impossible to say what's the most striking out of them. The momentum is only gathering. For example, you can visit the Karandash Fest. What do you think this is all about? What is this dedicated to? It is dedicated to the beloved clown Karandash. Just look at his life story. We will add it and attach it to the text of this briefing. This is something that is a part of our history and culture. Also, I'd like to mention the gastronomic festival called Kalitka, dedicated to the Karelian pie. The Karelians have lived in its region for over 400 years. Also, I'd like to mention the Seliger Fishmonger Festival and the Ferishagen Cheese Fest and the Aerostan Zavidovo Sports Festival, Opera and Jazz and Zavidovo, and also a separate mention should go to concerts performed by Igor Butman, just to name just a few of the events. And the events are numerous and diverse in character. Of course, it would be important to mention the Pozharsky cutlets. It would be only fair for every visitor of the region to try them. You can use all adjectives usually used with the word tourism: cultural, educational, recreational, pilgrimage, active, and sports, nature, for children and family. Everything can be applied to activities in this region. But of course, this is all well, but we are frequently asked by foreign citizens that if we know so much about our country, what could the foreign visitors do to find out all the opportunities presented by the tourist cluster in the Tver region? Of course, there are a lot of opportunities for that, but without interactive assistance, without something being accessible through smartphones or different other devices, this would be of use. I'm talking about apps that could be convenient to use when planning a trip to Russia from abroad. That's why I wanted to mention a couple of words about the project called, in English, because it's intended for foreigners, the Visit Russia project. It contains useful information for everyone who is planning their trip into Russia. Our country pays enormous attention to, as per tradition, to making trips for foreigners as comfortable as possible. And this has been developed with the participation of the different state agencies, for example, the Central Bank and the Agency of Strategic Initiatives and some other commercial structures. What is the essence of this project? It is to create a digital platform based on AI technologies and a mobile app. We will supplement text briefing with the corresponding links that will be working on the principle of a single window principle to reunite all services required for a comfortable trip, and also to explain information with the e-visas and other rules of visiting of a countries, the use of a mobile network, payment services, etc., etc. Also, voice assistance is available based on AI technologies, which supports 36 languages.
The platform allows to book hotels and buy tickets and buy insurance, and gives guidelines as per planning of your tourist routes, and provides with the best whereabouts and recreation options. And this project has garnered a lot of interest among foreigners from Middle East, India and Turkey, and our friends from elsewhere. 200,000 tourists visit this web portal each day. So please get to know it and test it and utilize it on tour to make a wonderful journey. Now we move to the relevant international agenda, and I will start by mentioning a very grave topic. Today, on the 27th of July, I cannot actually select a verb. Well, we commemorate a tragic date. It is a day of remembrance for children who were victims of the brutal war unleashed by the fascist Kiev regime. And the commemorative date was established by the decree of the head of the People's Republic of Donetsk on the 11th of July 2022. On that day, in 2014, Ukrainian punitive forces launched a Grad missile attack on the downtown and center of Holovka, killing 22 civilians, including 4 children. Among them were 23-year-old Kristina Zhuk and her 10-month-old daughter, who later became known as the Holovka Madonna. Their names are immortalized on the Avenue of Angels in Donetsk. According to the investigative committee of the Russian Federation, from 2014 to 2026, over 240 children were killed by the Ukrainian armed forces. Another 1,225 were injured to varying degrees. The terrorist attack on the dormitory of a pedagogical college in Starobelsk on the 22nd of May killed 21 students, and I'd like to emphasize most of them were female students, and injured more than 40 others. On the 17th of June, a strike on a bus carrying children in the Bryansk region killed a pregnant woman accompanying them and injured 6 people, including 5 children. On the 20th of July, a drone struck a passenger bus in Shebekino, killing a 3-year-old child. What has the Kiev regime been telling about children and care for children? They allegedly scout for children, for those children, and actually, you know what, for normal people, for people who can be regarded as humans and as humane and as civilized. They do not regard children as alien. They do not distinguish children by ethnicity, nationality, creed, race. For normal people, there is the notion of child, and normal people will never ever see the suffering of children and trying to assist or display compassion will ask, who do you belong to? What is your ethnicity? What is your nationality? What is your mother tongue? What are your parents called? And what is your patronymic name? And what are the final letters of your surname? And which God you pray? And who do you believe in? A normal individual will first do everything and anything to help a kid and alleviate the suffering or prevent the suffering from happening. And those who believe and state that they are supportive of resolutions in support of maternity and childhood, and have been touting everybody that they've been looking for their children, but at the same time they horribly, atrociously kill children. They cannot be regarded as normal people, normal humans. And actually, secondly, they need to get those kids back, not to provide them with a happy childhood and life, but to justify for their bloody crimes and to deflect everyone's attention from their bloody crimes. And thirdly, to make them kids, any kids, fall another prey to their ideology. Either indirectly or actually literally. Indirectly means infecting them with their Nazi ideology, or literally it means mobilizing them in several years and throw them into the pot of war. The horrible statistics of the Kiev regime continue. They have been impacting kids The West has been turning a blind eye, but this is a protruded card, and actually they've been supplying arms, giving new munitions and equipment and political support. And they've been justifying the barbaric acts and silencing and hushing up the terrorist attacks and whitewashing their neo-Nazi character of the perpetrators. But we forget nothing. We will continue to point out the war crimes committed by the Ukraine with the full support of the self-proclaimed so-called progressive, in inverted commas, so-called progressive part of the global community, and we will seek to ensure that everyone responsible for the pain, suffering and death of children receives the due punishment. This is no vengeance, this is no instinct, this is preserving what is called humanity on Earth. On the 27th of July at 10 a.m. Moscow time, a memorial service for the children of Donbass and other Russian regions whose lives were taken by the criminal Kiev regime was held at Donetsk People's Republic Square in Moscow. Participants laid flowers at a sign bearing the names of the deceased. A memorial service was held at the Donskoy Monastery. Memorial services for children who have passed away are also being held in many other Russian cities. Our entire country prays for them and will do everything that their names never be forgotten. And as I've said, the perpetrators, the criminals, be punished. Now we move to the situation around the so-called Ukrainian crisis. Although we all know what it's all about. It's about a fight against neo-Nazism that, with the support of Western handlers, continues its terror against civilian population. And the Kiev neo-Nazi regime, with the support of Western handlers, continues its terror against the civilian population and civilian infrastructure. During the week of 13 to 19 of July, 433 people were injured at the hands of Ukrainian armed forces. 15 to 24th July, in 9 days, out of them 86 died, including 6 children, and 409 were wounded, including 12 children, and now regions, so that nobody on the planet should say they haven't been to know. Kirovsk Oblast, 24th of July, a missile attack on an enterprise in Kirov killed 5 people and 26 were injured. We commented on that on the 24th of July with a message on the site. Belgorod region, on July 18th and 20th, drones with shrapnel were used to attack the passenger buses in the village of Dubovoye. In the first attack, 4 people were injured. In the second attack, a child and 4 women were killed, and actually 27 people were wounded, including a 17-year-old teenager. The most mind-boggling is actually, well, these social statistics are organized this way. Them who call adolescents or teenagers should not be treated as children, but you know, what are they aged 17 or 18? Between the 15th and to 23rd July, Ukrainian armed forces strikes in the region killed 16 people and wounded at least 134, including the young man mentioned above, a 13-year-old girl, 2 16-year-old girls and a 18-year-old girl, and 2 young men aged 16 and 18. Terrorists damaged equipment at the Belgorod reservoir hydraulic structures. Now, Bryansk Oblast, on the 16th of July, enemy drone strikes in Grad multiple launch rocket systems struck the village Suzemka, killing 3 people, including a 15-year-old girl and her grandmother, wounding 16 others. On the 22nd of July, drone strikes killed 1 person and injured 4 others. Voronezh Oblast. On the night of the 23rd of July, drone crashed during a massive air raid, causing a fire in a private home in a Voronezh suburb. A 3-year-old boy was killed and his parents were wounded. Donetsk Republic. From the 15th to 23rd of July, shelling and drone strikes by the Ukrainian armed forces killed 5 people and wounded more than 20, including an infant, a girl born in 2008, and 3 ambulance crew members. Zaporozhye Oblast. During the same period, 3 people were killed, at least 24 wounded by Ukrainian armed forces. A school building was damaged in the village of Priazovsk on the night into the 25th of July. A drone attacked innocent people in a tourist base, and 4 children were killed. Krasnodar Krai. On the 21st of July, debris from a downed enemy drone fell on a 7-year-old girl in Sochi. Ukrainian drone attacks on the night of July 22 killed a security guard in Armavir and a girl in Krasnodar and wounded 10 others. Kursk Oblast. From 15th to 23rd of July, drone and artillery attacks killed 1 person and wounded 23 others, including 4 girls between the ages of 16 to 20. And a Belarusian citizen. On the 19th of July, enemy drones struck 4 apartment buildings in Kursk, blocks of flats in Kursk, a bus stop and a grocery store in Lgov. Lugansk People's Republic. 10 people were killed and there were 35 injured in enemy attacks in the region on the same days, including 2 children aged 10 and 14 and 5 emergency services personnel coming home from extinguishing a fire. Moscow region. On the night of the 18th of July, Ukrainian drone strikes on civilian infrastructure in several towns killed 1 civilian and injured 61 people, including 57 in Elektrostal. A drone strike on the night of July 20 injured 10 civilians, including an 11-year-old girl and 3 Chinese citizens. Republic of Crimea. From the 17th to 23rd of July, 4 people killed and 23 injured in enemy attacks, including 2 children, and 17 residents were killed in a drone strike on a multi-story building in Yalta on the night of July 22nd. Stavropol Krai, or region, territory. On the night of July 22nd, 5 people were injured as a result of an enemy drone attack on a warehouse complex in Novorossiysk and the resulting fire. Tambov region. On the night of the 18th of July, cynical Ukrainian armed forces, a drone attack on a Wildberries warehouse in Kotovsk killed 7 employees working in the night shift and injured 25 others. All drones were loaded with ballistic missiles to maximize casualties, with metal shrapnel, to maximize casualties. Kherson Oblast. From 15 to 23 of July, 9 people were killed and at least 43 injured. Yaroslav Oblast. While repelling a massive drone strike on July 16, a man was killed and 4 others were injured by the debris. They know that in the battlefield they will not gain. This is why they strike the civilians. For all that, punishment is to follow, and the armed forces and law enforcement of Russia will deliver the punishment. And the law enforcement agencies continue to gather evidence to hold Kiev, regime functionaries, militants, and Ukrainian troops, command and foreign mercenaries accountable for war crimes and terrorism. For terrorist activities in the Kursk region in 2025, Ukrainian armed forces, militants Roman Shapoval, 16 years of imprisonment, Vasily Buhalo and Valery Nikitenko, 15 years of imprisonment each, were sentenced in person to lengthy terms. And other Azov regiment, which is a prohibited entity, mercenaries Sergei Timashov and Alexei Pashivtsev, were sentenced to 14 and 19.5 years in prison respectively. Colombian mercenaries Meneses ed Armando Pipicaño, Nargoti Julio Cesar Burbaño, who fought on the side of the Ukrainian forces, were sentenced in absentia to 14 and 13.5 years in prison. The court has sentenced Eldoradas Butamas, a journalist who, with the Lithuanian National Radio and Television, to 20 years in prison in absentia. He was involved in providing financial support to Lithuanian mercenaries who fought on the side of the Kiev regime in Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics, and well as to the Ukrainian forces and units involved in terrorists. Well, on July 15th, the Ukrainian Statehood Day, and this is the so-called celebration of that day, witch huddle, I'd say. Sovereign Ukraine had a right to celebrate their statehood or Independence Day, but actually it was originally scheduled to coincide with the day of the Christianization or conversion of Rus on July the 28th. But since 2024, following the artificial transition to the Gregorian Church calendar, it has been moved back 2 weeks. The so-called 5th Ukraine Southeastern Europe Summit, in inverted commas, held in Kiev was timed to coincide with this date. Its participants became the main protagonists of the festivities. It was called the Ukrainian Statehood Day, and naturally, well, people remember their heroes of the past and remember their past and have theatrical performances related to their national symbols and decorate their own nationals, but the Kiev regime makes it coincide with another date and engages international participants, which actually dilutes this statehood, and they've been actually inviting those who master and command them to attend the festivities. So these participants of the Ukraine Southeastern Europe Summit became the main protagonists of those festivities. Just a short example, a brief example to cite. If a family marks an important family holiday like a marriage anniversary or a birthday of a family member, something related to the family, this family's history, but at the same time they invite as the guests of honor someone who never bore any relation to the family. So, and this accounts for it. So, and those people that don't have anything to do with Ukrainian statehood were given a walk through sacred, so to say, sites and places associated with, what do you think? Just try to fancy where the Ukrainian statehood was born, where the origins are.
Places linked to the events of the anti-constitutional coup of 2014 and correspondingly the current conflict situation, everything that happened beforehand.
Однако от посещения Бучи, куда часто возят политических туристов, хозяева решили воздержаться в этот раз из-за опасения ударов российской армии. Ну, конечно, для пущей убедительности в Киеве не раз
the first to be awarded the Order of Europe, awarded personally by Vladimir Zelensky. And this is all during the holiday linked to Ukrainian statehood. And this order was dedicated to Europe. They have diluted Ukraine on Bankovaya Street. Apparently touched by such honors, Madame von der Leyen stated that she recalls her trip to Bucha, especially difficult for her almost every day. As the saying goes, she was caught red-handed, and we couldn't imagine a better self-incriminating admission of this staged anti-Russian provocation. Remember those lists with the surnames, the list of the alleged victims of Bucha, which no one ever saw. Of course, there have been a lot of lies surrounding the conflict, but there's a very simple and very modern step that could have been done a long time ago. Just publish the list of those that they are so concerned about, detailing names, surnames, dates of birth. And second thing they could have done is to show the place when they are buried. This could be done by those people who cherish the memory of those who have allegedly died, especially if it's claimed that they died en masse as part of some criminal act. Where is everything connected to it? There is nothing. Why is that? Because there hasn't been anything in the first place. Also, we saw Sir Keir Starmer, former British PM, who couldn't but spent his first days in retirement any other way. On July 16, he has made an announced farewell visit to Kiev before his resignation. His visit was disrupted by the change of government in Ukraine itself and the resulting political upheaval. Ultimately, Sir Keir Starmer contented himself with meeting with Mr. Zelensky, to whom he reported on his cabinet's work to aid Ukraine. He cited London's annual provision of £3.5 billion per year until 2031 for Kiev's military needs, the transfer of approximately 250,000 drones, 8,000 missiles, and 350,000 artillery shells, as well as the escalation of sanctions pressure on Russia, among his personal achievements. He announced this day, saying that the Western minority has accustomed themselves to thinking about this new normalcy, so that everything could be perceived as it's shown in the media as something normal. Just think of it. Who is the prime minister of a country reporting to? No matter the country or the analogous position, the head of the administration, prime minister, doesn't matter. The key person in the government, the key leaders of the country, on the eve of his resignation, who is he reporting to? Their own people. They're holding events, they are coming to the parliament or some legislature institution. They meet with the representative of the popular movements representing their party. In each country there are some procedures and traditions in place. Now what we see is a representative of Western minority is arriving with a report on his accomplished work. He is coming to the Bankovaya Street. What does this resemble? This resembles a ritual, as if they should bend the knee before some idols that they have taught everyone to worship, to report on the work accomplished, without mentioning that this work in the first place is the scope of sabotaging their own countries, their own stability, or putting mines under their own countries and peoples. No, on the contrary, they are proud of what they've done and what they've accomplished. Recently we heard Starmer say with no less glee that his administration saw the British Parliament, the most homosexual of its kind in the world, just to understand the level of the people occupying those posts in the Western community, trying to promulgate and continue this dictate of the will to the entirety of the world. Also, Starmer mentioned and announced Britain's intention to raise £300 million together with Sweden for the production and delivery of new 16 Gripen E fighter jets, a third of which would be British-made, to the Ukrainian armed forces by 2021. He also particularly highlighted the centenary partnership agreement signed in January 2025. Usually people, when they are coming with a visit to other countries at the end of their tenure, they are announcing or reporting about the projects that would be defining to improve the livelihood of the future generation. What could be relevant in that regard? Obviously, the questions of technology. The entirety of the world is now in discussion about the artificial intelligence technologies and new ways of medicine, especially after 2020 in the pandemic. There is a heightened interest in everything that relates to medicine, environment, which used to be an important priority area for the West, the so-called human rights. Why am I saying so-called? Because I'm talking about the West's interpretation of human rights. Of course, nothing of that sort was mentioned. He only mentioned the things that would be an obvious continuation of Western minorities policy, and he talked about this with pride. And for such outstanding results in sponsoring the conflict, Sir Keir Starmer was awarded the Ukrainian Order of Freedom. Upon receiving the award, he assured Zelensky of London's unwavering pro-Kiev position, regardless of any change in British government. No matter who is in power in the UK, the chief desires to inflict maximum damage to Russia, to provoke a confrontation dangerous for Europe, regardless of the costs, including those to its own country. It's irrevocable. Now, a couple of words about the extremist website called Mirotvorets, or Peacemaker. This is a criminal practice to place the personal data of Russian citizens in different foreign databases, especially of an extremist kind. On July 14th, Russian Minister of Internal Affairs placed one of its founders of the portal, Mr. Georgy Tsuka, on the wanted list. He was previously included in our country's list of extremists and terrorists. The website was founded in 2014 in close cooperation, if not under supervision, of the Ukrainian intelligence agencies. It posts the personal data of individuals the website's creators believe are involved in law breaking and crimes against Ukraine's, as they formulate it, Ukraine's national security. What does this signify? Anyone who expresses any opinion that differs from the official position or contradicts the narratives of the Nazi Kiev regime is automatically becoming the enemy of Ukraine and risks being posted on this website. Essentially, they are forming true of a kind hit lists. It was after the publication on this website that Italian journalist Andrea Ruccelli, writer and publicist Oles Buzina, the founder of former Party of Regions deputy Oleg Kalashnikov, and Russian journalist Daria Dugina were murdered. They have been murdered, not just died by themselves. Whenever someone featured on the website dies, their photo is marked with the label liquidated. And this is all happening during the era where there's been more than 100 years since the adoption of the Charter of the Rights of the Person, and they are using technology openly, without any reproach on the part of the Western ruling circles, and all those same things should have been classed as something deeply reproachable, deeply deplorable by the Western media and non-state actors. In addition to politicians, journalists, diplomats, and public figures, the portal also includes information about Russian athletes and cultural figures. In other words, people are sentenced to death for example, athletic achievements and creative work. But it's not the end of it. The most cynical thing that we see is that this website has data about minors, adolescents. Perhaps you might think that we're trying to alter the information, that perhaps those children have already grown. But no, information published on this website includes children, includes minors. While such cases were previously isolated in character, now children are being added in droves. Among them are not only Russian children, but also from Belarus, from Ukraine, Azerbaijan, Israel, Uzbekistan, and Moldova. As absurd as it may sound, the children are accused of attempting to violate the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine and deliberately violating the state border of Ukraine. And we're talking about children. They cannot move without being accompanied by an adult or a relative or organizer of a certain trip that are taking all the accountability for their movements. In 2025, more than 100 children and teenagers from Russia found themselves published on this website. In January this year, the database included information on 25 children aged 2 to 3. Just think of it, aged 2 to 3. In March this year, they were joined by 3 boys aged 6, 10, and 13. One of them was not even a year old when, according to Ukrainian authorities, he, quote, violated the state border of Ukraine. Is that normal? A 1-year-old child, is he providing documents or answering questions? Can he give any explanation as to why he was in that place or another? The oldest is 17, the youngest only 5. In July this year, the name of a 17-year-old boy appeared on the site accused of illegally crossing the Ukrainian border, which he committed being 9. They tracked him. What an achievement. Such actions violate not only the international law and the Convention on Rights of the Child, but also all existing norms of morality and humanity. I would even say it in the following way. This website is propaganda of anti-morality. Children are turned into targets. Politically charged accusations are attributed to them, information is published, and are put on public display without any regard for their safety, dignity, or their future. You know, many people, when a couple years ago, when they first appeared on the website, when we saw children being featured there, many people interested in this topic and the agenda connected to Ukraine, honestly, perhaps they thought that this was a sort of a provocation. Perhaps the website was hacked, or the Kremlin hackers, the famous Russian hackers, hacked the site to marginalize the Kiev regime. This cannot be happening for real, can it? Well, it can. Let's close our eyes, let's ignore it, just let's think that there are no children on this website. Now we see dozens, hundreds of such names on the website. This violates all principles of international law, humanitarian law, and morality. This is a cynical, I don't know, cynical branding against minors and the deliberate creation of risks for those children and their families. Against this backdrop, the lamentations of the Kiev regime on international platforms about their concern for children's rights and their accusations leveled against Russia of violating children's rights appear cynical and even farcical. And this is a self-admittance of guilt. I also mentioned briefly the creation of Ukrainian national pantheon in the Kiev-Pечерsk Lavra. Usually I say something along the lines to journalists and other participants of the briefing who are trying to attract attention. I will warn everyone that perhaps not everyone will perhaps be able to handle it. Those the things I'm about to talk about are perhaps not for the weak-willed. Perhaps if you don't find the strength within yourself to face it, I will not judge you. On July 17, the head of the Ukrainian Institute of National Remembrance and well-known Hitler admirer, and it's exactly what he is. I'm not trying to libel him. Alexander Arfurov revealed some details of Bankovy's plan to create the Ukrainian national pantheon in the territory of the Kiev-Pечерsk Lavra. According to him, this memorial cemetery is not intended for collecting relics. This is the Kiev-Pечерsk Lavra, after all.
This is the place where monks lived as per the tenets of Christianity, where neither politics nor fashion had the upper hand, but what went through millennia, the Orthodox faith, Christianity. And now they've been saying that this is not a place for collecting relics. And this Lavrov also said that this will not be converted into a large-scale cemetery, according to him. Not 300 to 500 people will be buried there, but several dozen prominent Ukrainians. It's a quote. He emphasized that the ashes of such classic Ukrainian figures as Taras Shevchenko, Lesya Ukrainka, and Ivan Franko and Ivan Kotlyarevsky will not be transferred to the Volta. Apparently, the authorities intend to give preference exclusively to those known for bloody crimes only. Well, in this case, I cannot but mention that Taras Shevchenko and Lesya Ukrainka are the lucky ones not to be put on the same string, because it is a place for something different, a place for those the Ukrainian Orthodox Church selected to be buried there, not for those who are used as a justification of their insane acts. So it's very hard to comment upon schizophrenic delirium, but we've got to do that, otherwise no one in the global community knows what has been happening in Ukraine, and they will not have faith in that. They will not take that seriously. Apparently, the authorities intend to give preference exclusively to those known for bloody crimes, and the remains of Bandera, Shushkevich, and other Nazi scum will be buried in the pantheon, which would be an unprecedented, cynical desecration and sacrilege of the holy monastery. Just fancy. Earlier, the idea of creating a pantheon on the monastery grounds was approved by the head of the so-called Orthodox Church of Ukraine, Epiphanius Domenko, who believed that it was necessary to restore historical memory and properly perpetuate the names of outstanding statesmen and military leaders, end of quote. And this convincingly demonstrates that the schismatics who seized the Volta, or the destructors of the Orthodox faith in Ukraine, view it solely as a venue and a platform for political actions and entertainment shows commissioned by the secular authorities. Just a culinary show right amid the Lent there, and now all those indecency is put on display for Bankovaya, for those who rule in Ukraine, the Volta of Kiev has ceased to be a place to communicate with God, but instead it is a place to worship Satan. I cannot put it otherwise. And we've been witnessing the commemoration of the anti-heroes as heroes. This is prompted by the devil. All the above facts confirm the urgency of the tasks of denazification and demilitarization of Ukraine and the elimination of threats emanating from its territory. These goals will be certainly achieved. And now let's look what causes the utmost hatred of the Kiev regime. The Kiev regime is suffering defeat not only on the battlefield but also on the language front. Despite unprecedented oppression, Russian-speaking residents of Ukraine, who constitute the majority, continue to think and communicate in the great and powerful language of their ancestors, of their childhood, of their parents, of their schools, of their books. In desperation, the Zelensky regime is intensifying not popularization of the Ukrainian language, but instead intensifying repression. Old school, bricks and mortar, worth possible repression. On the 15th of July and the 22nd of this year, bills were submitted one after another to the Verkhovna Rada, proposing amendments to more than 24 laws aimed at tightening language legislation. The bills stipulate the inadmissibility of the use of Russian in extracurricular education, private educational institutions and children's recreation activities, public performances, screenings of works and the reproduction of phonograms and video clips in the language of the aggressor state are barred and prohibited. What about the official language of the United Nations? Is it possible? Oh, probably it is. So this is self-deception. They are blind-ended. So they look like a dog that has bit its tail and spins around its own axis. So it is prohibited. Something that is so dear for millions of people. Fines for individuals are expected to increase to 17,000 hryvnias, which is 30,000 rubles for the first offence, and more to come, 25.5, which is 44,000 rubles for repeat offences. This is despite the current subsistence level in Ukraine is 3,200 hryvnias. So this is just penalizing the use of mother tongue. You know, just recently I just had to watch an interview of a former music performer who used to perform in this country, being a national of our country. I cannot say whether he has given up our nationality or not. So he used to be popular in this country. And later he left Russia and he decided to support the Kiev regime with, what do you think? And this is about someone who composed and performed songs. This is an anti-utopia, a dystopia that could hardly be fancied by any futurist. He decided to support Ukraine and back the Kiev regime by not singing songs in the Russian language. So he has been composing them in Russian for decades, performing and earning and building his own subsistence and providing for his family. And he has probably been receiving some royalty. fees and payouts for what he finds on, what you may find on the line. So, which is a testimony of the self-destruction. This is idiocy that has been destroying human mind, human cognition. Like another breaking news coming from the Baltics, you cannot sing songs in the Russian language now. And their public figures who became stars thanks to these songs in Russian are now banned from from playing these songs and singing them. This is a werewolf nation, a werewolf state. So, for legal entities, fines of up to 170,000 hryvnias are planned for the public performance of Russian language music in retail, catering and service establishment. Particular attention is being paid to expanding the powers of the language ombudsman, a pillar of the repressive mechanism built into the system of the state institutions. This punitive body encourages snitching and employs a vast network of, I can call them agents or spies or whistleblowers. What are they? Who are they? Well, the most interesting thing is, well, that the repressions and snitching and persecution and an inability to promote one's own national component were the reasons for them to break away from the USSR, the origins of their breaking away from the USSR. In our country, they were not able, they said, to withstand what happened anymore. I do not know any other historical epoch, that would see something similar to such punitive measures applied in this country. So this is what they ended up, where they ended up. And they make their own nationals. They compel to reject our music and the books, the works of art, works of literature. They ban them and bar them from that. Special heed is paid to expanding the scope. In the first half of 2026, Language Ombudsman Yelena Ivanovska received 1,378 complaints about the use of the Russian language. They don't have any other issues outstanding. The economy is booming and blooming, and their technology is state-of-the-art, and they've got public concordia and consent, and everybody kinda is envious, and now they decided to ban mother tongue. And this Sprechenführer office said that it's 12 denunciations more than year on year. A third of the violators live in Kiev, followed by Odessa, Kharkiv, and Dnipropetrovsk. Well, for Ukraine, with a population of 25 million, whose population is by no means averse to the Russian language and communicates fluently in it, these numbers are negligible, you know, around 1,000. So it's negligible. The level of institutionalization of the repressive instrument, which violates both the constitution and the country's international obligations, is horrifying. The agency's official website cites several illustrative examples of how language wardens harass Russian-speaking citizens, primarily teachers, who at great personal risk selflessly ensure children's right to education, communication, and development. Still, those kids cannot gauge their child's mindset against the novel developments of the Ukrainian legislation, and they speak the language that is their mother tongue. On the 3rd of June, a coach at a children's sports section in Kiev was fined 5,000 hryvnias. His crime, so to say, consisted of, I quote, using a non-state language during classes with children as well as during discussions regarding the training schedule, costs, sports equipment and rules of conduct of the classes. What comes next, I wonder? They're gonna look which numbers are used. It's Arab numbers will be banned. What comes next? I just ask a question that I asked before, and the Mendeleev periodic table is something that concerns me. How much are they going to fine for quoting the Mendeleev chemical table? Or will they cite anything else instead? Like a physical education teacher, just if asked a question, responds in Russian and receives a fine, 5,000 hryvnias. And for them, 5,000 hryvnias is 2/3 of their salary. Why? What for? On the 6th of June, it was reported that a similar offence was being charged against the coach, the children's and youth sports school and...
Как он смел в течение года использование негосударственного языка в образовательном процессе при исполнении служебных обязанностей. С мужчины взыскали 8500 гривен. Это, как я понимаю, вообще весь его месячный оклад. 30 июня, 22 июля
visited Kiev to announce what they were doing to continue the conflict. What is this dichotomy, bipolar disorder? What is this that we're witnessing? Lie to me once, shame on you. Lie to me twice, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I don't know. Perhaps there's an expert commentary contained in this report. We would also like to share our own ideas, because although we doubt that the report authors and experts possess objective data. And let's talk about our relations between Russia and the UK. I will try to stay civil. Leaving aside the remaining diplomatic channels and intergovernmental contacts are virtually frozen, including dialogue at the highest and at the top level and the high level. The UK and our country are the only P5 states that don't have mutual military diplomatic presence in such difficult times. Trade and investment ties have been reduced to a minimum. Interaction between regions and sister cities has been suspended. There are virtually no cultural and academic exchanges, and all this occurred solely due to the actions of the British side. Russia has repeatedly stated that we are fundamentally ready to engage with London, provided that this engagement is conducted on a mutually respectful and equal basis, fully taking into account our national interests, including in the area of security, and especially giving the idea that there are such things as national interests, especially when it comes to security. In turn, the undermining of relations was a result of targeted anti-Russian measures taken by the UK authorities. In 2018, London used the Salisbury provocation to seriously restrict channels of bilateral dialogue and push other European countries to do the same. In 2022, it ramped up sanctions pressure. In 2024, under a made-up pretext, it expelled our military attaché. In 2025, it launched the Foreign Influence Registration Scheme, under which a regime of enhanced scrutiny is applied to anyone attempting to interact with our authorities being under British jurisdiction in a discriminatory manner. The UK politicians have used every means possible to discourage their own citizens and organizations from engaging with Russia, attempting to falsely demonize our country to prevent first-hand information from reaching the British media. We already mentioned in much detail what has been done to Russian journalists, and the links will be additionally provided in the text of today's briefing. All this was accompanied by steps to create an anti-Russia out of Ukraine, and after the launch of special military operation, they have done their utmost to undermine the 2022 negotiation process, when the British PM at the time, Boris Johnson, personally arrived to Kiev to talk the Ukrainian side out of participating in peaceful negotiations. They have outdone themselves to consolidate the Western countries' efforts in confronting our country in Ukraine. They are not even simply positioning themselves as ideologists and key sponsors of the Kiev regime, pumping the Ukrainian armed forces with weapons and military equipment. They boast about this, they're proud about this, and as Mr. Starmer mentioned this, they are gleeful about it. They are hypocritically ignoring the fact that they are sacrificing Ukrainian lives and are directly involved in terrorist attacks on civilian infrastructure in Russia to prolong the conflict for their own interests. The responsibility for this state of affairs lies solely with the UK and particularly the House of Commons. Instead of developing interparliamentary dialogue to serve as a safety net, a backup line of communication in the event of a crisis, or at least to attempts to ensure critical scrutiny of government initiatives, British legislators almost unanimously and quite creatively at that supported the anti-Russian line of successive cabinets and the continuation of the establishment as a whole. The Russia group that existed in the House of Commons was transformed into a Russophobic tribunal after the 2024 elections. Russian Democracy group was established in the British Parliament. In essence, this is a group that is tasked with interfering into internal affairs of a sovereign state. Russian diplomats were banned from appearing in Westminster. Even in the announcement of this current report, the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Madam Emily Thornberry, does not advocate for a balanced analysis, but rather peddles some substantiated accusations that can be used for propaganda and justification for further unfriendly steps made by the British government. They are now simply engaged in militarization. They have no other ways to explain to their own population why they need to continue to support the militarization of the Kiev regime. The stakes are very high. The fragility of peace becomes even clearer. And we would recommend that the British parliamentarians, who are not just who are really striving for the prosperity of the country, for peace or in Europe, they should use the work on this report to convey to the government the futility of escalating confrontation to try to reverse the negative trends in our bilateral relations. Even minimal progress in our relations would serve the interest not only of simply our countries, but it would also benefit the entirety of the planet. And this is more important than personal political ambitions and the fear of being seen as someone who has not toed the party line, and so on and so forth. Also, what's interesting, on the 14th of July, there was a new statement made by the Danish Defense Intelligence Service. They released a statement announcing its offensive hacking operations against targets abroad, including hacking into information systems and infiltrating the personal mobile devices of foreign citizens. Just to think of it, it was the West that was accusing all those actors, including China and DPRK, of hacking operations against the foreign citizens. And now it turns out this is a new norm for the West, that they not only military intelligence services of Denmark are not only doing it, but are also publicly informing everyone about it. The statement outlined the agency's plans to expand its malicious capabilities in the field of information communications technologies. I would like to remind everyone this agency operates a training center for specialists tasked in cyber attacks against undesirable sovereign states, aptly named Hacker Academy. I've always asked myself a question: are the hackers strictly the people that have been appointed by Kremlin, or are there any other types of hackers? And now it turns out that the hackers are officially employed by authorities, for example, in Denmark. In an interview with the Person newspaper on July 15, the head of cyber operations of the Defense Intelligence Service of Denmark, Mark Fidel, openly admitted that the main targets of such attacks are Russia and China. Denmark's destructive cyber activities are not limited to this. Copenhagen provides practical assistance in the digital sphere to the Kiev regime. It has contributed to turning Ukraine into a springboard for cyber attacks. There are specific instances of the criminal group IT Army of Ukraine using Danish territory for malicious activities against Russia, as well as some attempts to fraud Russian citizens emanating from Danish IP addresses. Official appeals sent by the Russian embassy in Copenhagen to the Danish authorities regarding this matter, citing evidence of this illegal activity, have been ignored. Against this backdrop, Copenhagen's regular and founded accusations against the Russian Federation of alleged involvement in certain malicious activities in the information space appear absurd. The true motive behind such propaganda campaigns is to ramp up Russophobia and panic sentiments in society to justify hostile anti-Russian policy, serving to expand the powers and budgets of the intelligence services and agencies, and incur exorbitant expenditures directed to the militarization of Denmark. And now on some more beautiful things, we noted another yearly Europol report on the trends and evolutions of the terrorist threats in the EU. And regards some of these parts concerning the situation in Ukraine, I would like to point out that although the mindless repetition of anti-Russian slogans in the document, as they say, narratives, doesn't do any credit to European law enforcement professionals. However, they are again and again parroting, regurgitating anti-Russian narratives. They are still doing everything that we warned them against. the situation in Ukraine that the European Union bears full responsibility for through actively supporting the corrupt and criminal Kiev regime. This whole crisis is backfiring against European security. The Europol states that war could facilitate the acquisition of specialized skills by extremists, the legal traffickers of weapons, and misuse of migration flows, and the further division of EU society. Without corresponding intent, the European police officers have exposed their own authorities, namely the leaders of the European Union, France, Germany, and other EU member states, who are doing everything in their power to ensure this conflict continues. They publicly declare that keeping the Kiev regime afloat is their top priority. Pumping Kiev with weapons, which is then resold by corrupt Ukrainian officials to criminal and extremist groups, is also their priority, despite the fact that those weapons are already starting to turn up in European markets. The Europol identified growing threats for ordinary citizens, being the main group that is paying for these self-destructive policies, contrary to their own national interest. They designated as collateral damage. Now on the situation in Moldova. The developments in Moldova confirm that what we have repeatedly stated: the so-called European project of its leadership is leading on the one hand to a decline in the well-being and the livelihood of its citizens, and on the other hand to a severing of ties with Russia and other CIS countries, which only worsens the domestic economic situation. The Moldovan authorities are not toning down their anti-Russian rhetoric. Just on July 21st, the new Prime Minister, Mr. Tofan, speaking about the urgent reforms needed in the country, stated that it won't help anyone if we carry out reforms now, painful but necessary, and then the Russians, only for the Russians to come and win the elections. You already said that there are no Moldovans anymore, only Romanians in the country. What is this verbal apocalypse that we are hearing from Sandu and her henchmen's cabinet and offices? This is how the new government cares for the well-being of Moldovans. Eager to please its sponsors, Chisinau supports any anti-Russian attempts to any anti-Russian actions carried out by Brussels. On July 13th, the country's leadership joined the so-called coalition of the willing, the union of countries that are preparing armed intervention into Ukraine. According to official information from the Moldovan presidency, participation in the sanctions has been is legally compatible with the status of neutrality enshrined in the constitution, since other neutral states such as Austria and Ireland are also members of this coalition. A genius type of logic. Just take it, just note it, just think about it. They are, just to give an example, they are not committing criminal acts for express purpose because others are conducting the very same activities. What law does this emanate from? What logic that provides for that?
Well, there has been a lot of uproar in Moldova, and Moldovan officials boast that the country has acceded to 80% of the EU Council decisions on legal restrictive measures against Russian individuals and legal entities. Well, I'm referring to the people of Moldova,